I'm also going to record this and email it out too. So I'll make sure that if there's any links, if there's any website information that Lauran points to, that it will be a part of this and in the links below too. So I guess, Lauran, what would be a good start is for you to just share your role and we'll go from there. But what is your role within the world of NDIS?
Okay, so part of my role is I am a consultant and I'm also a support coordinator. So what that means is I work with members. My company is Round Squared and we like to call our clients members. It makes them feel a little bit more involved in the process. And we're a company that focuses on choice and control and making sure that everyone has access to living their best life. So part of my role as a support coordinator is to look at the plan, work with the family and link them in with the services that are going to help them best navigate, potentially a new diagnosis or an existing one that's had a few changes. So there's a few different people sort of within NDIS. You have your plan managers, which are the financial gurus. They do all of your bookwork, all of your accounting, and they are one of your best assets, second, of course, to a support coordinator such as myself. And part of why a plan manager is so important is they understand all of the legalities around paying your invoices each month and making sure that, things are charged in the correct way that they are. You also have the option of being self-managed, but please be aware that that can be very tricky. And that's when you have to do things all on your own, find your own supports, pay your own bills, do all of the research and all of the information on your own. Part of a support coordinator is to really work with the family as a whole and to navigate some of the, intricacies of finding reports, working with providers, seeing what is going to work best for your child or for your young adult or yourself as you navigate this NDIS journey. And then, so that's kind of a little bit of what I do. Any other questions right now, or where should I go to next?
Yeah, so thank you for clearing up the titles, because I know that the titles for me are even confusing still. So I know that that's very helpful. So let's start, Lauran. And for those of you watching live, pop all of your questions, anything in the chat box, and then I'll start to relay those back to Lauran as we go through. So you're welcome to interact with us. Let us know if you're there and what questions you have. So I guess, Lauran, why don't you start with the start of the process? Okay, what's important to have up your sleeve? What's going to work in the parents' favor, where everyone's winning? Okay, we're getting the right amount of funding, where we're getting the supports that we need. What do they need from the start? And then maybe work your way through the process and what you see as the most beneficial things for parents to do or to consider. We'll start there.
Okay, I guess part of it is early intervention is always a great start. So for parents with young children that are just beginning this journey, listen to your school teachers, listen to your daycare providers and your preschool teachers, and have a really good working relationship with your GP and your paediatrician. I know that diagnosis can initially sound very scary and can lead you down a path of, my child's in a box now, but that's really not what it is. I think if we can change the feeling and the tone around what a diagnosis means, is that it actually accesses so much more help, so much more understanding and greater collaboration with home life, school life, and then allied health. So when first accessing the NDIS, you'll need a few things in place first. You will need to have a formal diagnosis that has been signed off, usually by a paediatrician or a psychologist. So if I'm talking young children, sort of 7 years and younger, this can all be done through school referrals, through preschool referrals, through GP referrals, and no formalised sort of significant diagnosis needs to be sort of determined. Like, it's not like your child is this and they're going to be that forever. It's all about early intervention and support. When you're looking at children that are a little bit older, you would have noticed that there's some deficits, maybe some major behaviours, school just isn't quite working for them. So you've probably already started to engage with a team of professionals. Great professionals to have on board always is a really great GP and a paediatrician working with you. Your next best bets are occupational therapists. Find a good one, and they are your best resource. They will work with you with your sensory needs, with your functional capacity, and occupational therapists are really highly regarded within the NDIS system and can provide a lot of feedback and insight into what your next steps are. Generally speaking, your first plan is a little bit confronting and a little bit challenging as a parent to see on paper where your child is lacking. Just remember, you know your child best and you see all of their wonderful qualities and their unique abilities. NDIS is looking at their deficits and how they can work to help them come up to what's considered a normal level of interaction with their peers. So, you know, initially, once you've got your diagnosis, you can access the NDIS for applying for a plan, and your LAC, which is called your local area coordinator, will be your best resource initially. So it's a case of bringing the NDIS inquiries line, having a chat to someone over the phone, and all of the staff that are on that intake process are really lovely. They're very kind and very helpful, and they will start to steer you in the right direction. And from there, your NDIS journey starts.
Okay. And from that starting point, Lauran,
yes,
all right, what's the process? So I think the majority of people watching this probably already have NDIS funding, which is awesome. But for those of you who don't, what's that middle period like? What is the logistics of what happens from you've made that phone call and now I need to get things in order, and you know, now a plan manager is involved, or whatever the case may be? What's that middle period like?
So that middle period between requesting access to the NDIS and getting your first meet and greet with your local area coordinator is a case of sending in information to, I guess, solidify and acknowledge that this is what diagnosis your child has and these are the reports. When you go for that very first meeting, there's a few things that you should go being prepared for. You'll be asked questions like, what kind of help would you like for your child? What kind of goals would you like them to reach? So it could be a case of you would like your child or your young adult to communicate better with their peers. You might want to work on emotional regulation strategies. It might be independent living and finding and keeping a job. So work with your person, like your little person or your young adult, and find out what it is that they want and what you want moving forward, and go to that meeting with a clear focus on what supports you think are going to help your child. So that could be that you would like speech pathology, you would like an occupational therapist, you might require physio for anyone accessing the NDIS that has, you know, more a physical deficit. So when you go prepared for these things, have a few goals in mind and think about how you would like your plan to be managed from that point. I mentioned earlier about being self-managed. This does provide flexibility. However, all of the onus is then on you to find these supports, pay all of your own invoicing, and navigating the NDIS, which is ever changing and can be a little bit confusing. You can request to be plan managed, and that's where someone such as myself can come in. And there are lots of different fantastic companies that work with different individuals depending on where they happen to be in Australia. And it's important to note that while the NDIS is a national insurance scheme, it's actually state run. So you'll find slight differences between New South Wales, Queensland, Western Australia, etc. So it's important that you focus on receiving helps from your state that's state specific. Once you've done that, if you decide to be plan managed, you can ask your LAC what plan managers are around in the area. You can also do your own investigation. And from there, you can also ask for support coordination. In a first plan, you will learn more in the first 12 months than you'll probably learn on the rest of your NDIS journey. And it's really important to know that it's okay to ask for help, especially if this is a new diagnosis and you're really not sure what your next 12 months is going to look like. A support coordinator really links you in with those services and says, yeah, you know, these are some fantastic facilities here who offer great early intervention with occupational therapy, or this particular company works really great with that transition from school to work. Your support coordinator and your LAC, so that's your local area coordinator, are your main points of contact during that time. And then when you get your new plan, the first 3 months are all about implementing. It's about what services will work well for you, building and making those connections, starting to branch out into the community in a little bit, and knowing that you're not alone. That's really important. You're not the only one going through this, and it's completely okay to ask for help.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great. Thank you. So what's the time frame that we can expect, Lauran, between, and I know it varies and I know it's different, but just roughly?
Generally speaking, the NDIS likes to try and deal with inquiries within 28 days, depending on what area you're in and depending on where they're at with things. Sometimes it can be up to 90 days. They do, however, have a real commitment to helping families as quickly as possible. Excuse me, because they know how important it is to engage with services as quickly as possible. You can always ring the inquiries line. It's that 1-800 number. And you can request for updates on that process. They're usually pretty quick turnaround times, at least in engaging with that initial process.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. And so this is probably going to speak to one of the questions that's come through. So Carly, all right. So we've got our plan now,
Yep.
We've received it, we know where the funding is and the categories that it's in. So Carly specifically asked, how do we go back to the NDIS after receiving a plan when the plan hasn't been enough funding? So I know that this is a common question, or if there's going to be an issue with the NDIS, it's usually around the plan amount, right? And so Carly is saying that she hasn't used it all since February. That's the start, and the change in circumstances as well. So I think we've got a bit of a twofold question. What's the process if we don't feel like that it's enough funding? And also when there's changes in circumstances, how do we go about that as well?
Okay, well, to answer the first part in addressing the funding issue, often your best bet is to speak with your plan manager and support coordinator or the LAC. Ask those questions. When you're given a new plan, it's part of the LAC's role, local area coordinator, to actually explain to you what your plan is, where the categories of funding are, and how it's going to, or how you can access those services. Often they'll answer questions around why a particular thing was or wasn't funded, and they will seek, or they'll provide you with some clarity around that. From there, if you feel that you're not quite happy with that, or it doesn't seem to be meeting your needs, you can ask your LAC for the next step process. And depending on what that is, and again, this is just a general answer, having not seen the plan. I can't answer specifically, Carly, so sorry for that. It might be a case that a report wasn't received, or understood quite to the level that you needed it to be understood. Okay. So that perhaps it can be that it's a reviewed decision. What happens, and I think this is what's really important to understand, is when you meet with your LAC, is they will interview you, they will work with you, they'll read the reports, and together they'll build a plan for you. Part of what happens next all happens behind closed doors. It goes to the next stage, which is referred to as the delegate stage. And the delegate will look at that plan and approve particular requests and sometimes deny or reduce funding in those areas. So your LAC's job in that situation is to explain to you why in this situation at this time, the delegate may have said, look, we're not going to fund that at the moment. We want some more evidence around it. And that's where your LAC can advise, okay, in this situation, we need to review this and we can do it straight away, or see how you go. Let's continue to provide information and we'll see what's happening moving forward. I know it's not the best answer, but I hope that can provide some clarity. Now, when it comes to change of circumstances, you can apply to the NDIS through the inquiries line again for a change of circumstances. So that might be, if I was to provide a fairly generic example, you might have a child who has level 2 ASD and things have been going quite well. and then there's been sudden change to circumstances at home, at school, there might be something else going on, or there could be a secondary or a third diagnosis added to the mix. And so then what happens is you can apply to the NDIS and say, this is where we were, this is what was going on and what was working. We've now added this and this and this. So we actually need to increase our supports. We need to change our diagnosis. And then again, that's where your LAC comes back into it and you start the process again. It's all about providing the NDIS with reports from third party. So that's allied health, OT, speech, sometimes school, mentor, support workers, that kind of thing.
Sure. Okay. So it really sounds like the LAC is someone that you really want to get to know and that you want to have them understand who you are as a person, as a family, or whatever it is, right? They sound like a really good resource to have.
They're a fantastic resource and they're area specific. So they're fairly generally up to date with schools in the area, different service providers in the area, and some of the unique challenges that that particular area may have.
Yeah, sure. Okay. And so another question that's come through, Lauran. So this is an interesting question and you'll be able to answer it from a professional and personal standpoint. But so one person has said that their LAC resource for her daughter's plan said that they cannot get parent training support. She really wants to do the program that I offer and is saying that that's not allowed in the plan, right? And obviously I'm not too sure if they're checking for different categories there, Tegan, because that would be okay. But so I guess her question is, she doesn't feel like that's correct, that they're only checking the parent and support training category. And I don't know if you can advise from a professional standpoint in terms of what you know about my program and how it could fit with a plan, depending on what category she has. I know that that's been the case for a few people in the past.
Well, without seeing the plan, obviously I can't comment specifically because I'm not sure where the funding categories are. My best advice that I could give would be to ring the 1-800 NDIS number and explain to the person at intake what they would like and why. And in case you don't have it, I'm sure that anyone with NDIS really does, but it's 1-800-800-110. And just explain what it is and why. And this is why it's really brilliant to have a plan manager, because that's what you can jump on the phone, speak to your plan manager and say, hey, this is what I want. This is my plan. These are the categories. How can I go from here? And your plan manager has full access to your plan, your goals, your funding, the categories, etc. And this is where a support coordinator would help and actually do all of the groundwork for you on this. Okay. Something that I just want to add really quickly, which makes me think of it. It's actually really important for anyone with a plan to understand that the only people that see your entire plan is your LAC, yourself, and your plan manager and support coordinator. If you decide to engage with, say, speech therapy or something, you actually don't share your budget with the speech therapist. You share your goals and you allow your plan manager and your support coordinator to do the finance side of things like that. Unfortunately, within our industry, there are some really incredible, beautiful, honest, integral people. And there is, of course, the flip side of that. So it's very important to protect your plan and the finances around that. As for Jess's program, I can testify that it is absolutely incredible. It has been amazing for myself and my children and the differences that it has brought into our world. So I highly recommend it. Even if you can't get it through your NDIS plan, it is an investment that has, it's completely revolutionized how I parent my children and how they engage and interact with all of the other services that they work with. So, yeah.
Amazing. Thanks, Lauran. Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. And I've got a question, another one from Carly. I think she's curious, how did you become a support coordinator? So is there anything, I think this is probably from a work point of view. She's interested to know, did you need work experience in a different industry to work for the NDIS? How can you get a role with them like you?
Okay, well, I don't work for the NDIS as such. I work for a company called Round Squared. So I'm not sure exactly how NDIS employ. I myself have trade qualifications and a Bachelor of Education, and part of my teaching, I was working with students with disabilities in the special education unit often. Also add to that, I have my own life experience. So I have 3 children who are participants of the NDIS and have a broad range of, I don't like the word disability, I always say uniquenesses. So for me, what brought me into this job is working with an absolutely exceptional support coordinator who changed how I viewed my children's journey through their NDIS and what their disability did and did not mean. And then with some practical training and some real life experience and further education, I was able to jump on board and become a support coordinator. For me, it's about passion, it's about honesty, it's about integrity, and it's about meeting the people where they actually are, not where you are. So my job, I'm really lucky. I've learned more about myself and my children's journey through working with so many incredible members and their families. And this is not a job that you do for 5 minutes a day or for a couple of months and drop in and out. It's a real investment and a real lifestyle. So if you've got that passion and that lived experience, you can be some of the best advocates for our members that actually exist.
Yeah, absolutely. I know my dad has NDIS and he's a participant, and his plan coordinator and his planner, honestly, they're our greatest gifts, because they really get to understand what he needs, and they're passionate. So you can feel that passion just like you. It's so good. So I guess, Lauran, you're in this day in, day out. So what I'd love to hear from you is, what are the most either common or both common questions, right? If there was, this one question or 2 questions that always get asked, right, from your participants or whatever the case may be, usually participants, and the biggest mistakes that you see as well. Those 2 questions are probably would be really helpful at this stage, if you could share.
So I guess the biggest mistake is, and parents often make it with the best of intentions, is please share your worst experience on your worst day and understand that that is what you're seeking for help with. It's great that your child is now here, but please don't be too afraid and too proud to ask for help. So it's really important to paint the actual picture that's going on. Humble yourself and make yourself vulnerable enough to say, this is how bad it is. This is what we're struggling with, and this is where we need help, because you're not going to be judged. You're not going to be looked down upon as if you're failing. You're going to be viewed as someone who is really striving to help their child and get the best supports and help in place as possible. And as participants, I think, it's really a step out into being brave enough to try something new. It can be very confronting and very scary. And also know that the first fit isn't always the right fit. And sometimes you have to have a little bit of resilience and try something new and try something different. And it might take you 4 or 5 speech therapists until you find your person. It might take half a dozen support workers. But keep going and keep persisting with it, because once you find the people that really work with you and understand you, the whole world changes for you. I have a young man that I work with who, when I first met him, was very much confined to his room and quite afraid to sort of see the world outside. He's now engaging with lots of different services. He's part of a group program, and his goal for himself is to have the courage to impact the world. Now, I get to be a part of that, and for me, that is such a privilege. So I guess the only other, I suppose, piece of advice I would dare offer is, don't see the labeling or the diagnosis of your disability as, a closed box in which you then have to exist. Look at it as the freedom to be given permission to see the world in the beautiful, unique way that you do.
Perfect. I think that's really important, really, really important. And it doesn't matter what label it is, right? It doesn't matter what label it is, but we can really get stuck with them. And I do see that being one of the biggest downfalls of a lot of different world systems, methods, whatever the case may be. So thanks for sharing that, Lauran. So if there is, let's see, I just want to see if there are any other questions here. So there's one question about sensory tools. So this mum has said she's been told that they're not supported anymore. They're not allowed to be put into a plan. Is this true in your experience? Do you know why? Is it still possible? What do you know about the sensory tools?
Generally speaking, it is related to age-specific and particular types of sensory tools. If they are recommended by an OT with a full report explaining the whys behind it, I can tell you that things like weighted blankets are no longer funded as they are posed and deemed too risky. There are other things that are very appropriate, particular toothbrushes, for examples, certain like fidget toys. It just depends on what's actually included in your plan, whether you have low cost assistive technology, whether or not you have an OT report that actually verifies the need for it. It's not something you can just go out and go, oh, I've got a plan, I'm going to buy a trampoline. That's really not how it works. And again, this is a question that you can work with your LAC. And if you've got a plan manager and a support coordinator, they can advise you of how the categories within your plan and cross-reference that with your reports that you've received from Allied Health. So in some cases, yes, and then in some cases, no. So again, I'm really sorry that it's not a specific answer.
Yeah, and everybody's different, so I get it. So it sounds like, Lauran, an OT assessment really does hold a lot of the help and support for, advocating for what a lot of kids or adults might need in their everyday life. So that OT assessment is going to be one that is fairly critical and fairly important. Yeah. So I guess, Lauran, while we finish up, and for those of you, I'm going to put Lauran's details, email address in this chat so that you can, if you're looking for a coordinator, and if you're looking for support, I'm like, I don't even know what your caseload is like, Lauran. But
I have some wiggle room.
Okay. So I'm going to put Lauran's details there because Lauran does live in New South Wales. Okay, that's something for some of you that will need to consider in your choice. But also, you'll still be able to contact Lauran. It might still work out, right? It could still work. So. And Lauran's amazing. She's phenomenal, as you can already tell. So while we finish up, Lauran, is there anything that we haven't chatted about that you feel like is really important during this process and journey? You're a mum, you're in it with your kids too, as a mum, but also as the professional, as the worker. So is there anything that you just feel like parents should know that it would really help them during this process outside of what you've already shared?
Well, I suppose there's the thought of what is considered reasonable and necessary. So, as a mum or as a parent, think about what you consider to be reasonable and what you consider to be necessary sort of in your world moving forward. So that will help you advocate for your child. So someone might say, your child has this diagnosis, so they need A, B, C, and that's how we're going to work. But that might not fit and that might not work for your child. So you look at what is reasonable and necessary for you and your family and what best decisions you can make moving forward. So for you, it might not be that you go and you see an OT. It might be that you focus on group work and group programs. It might be that physical-based activities is the best way to deal with emotional regulation and not sitting with a psychologist who is very traditional. So really come back to what is best for your family and come at it from the point of view that this is reasonable and necessary for my family because, and then if you can justify that to yourself and then take that further, that often is very, very helpful. And just know you're not alone and you're doing the best that you absolutely can, and it's completely okay to ask for help. And we all cry and we all yell and we all have moments, and that just makes us real. So please reach out, ask anything. I will help where I can. We have lots of consultants as far south as Bega, and we have a great consultant in Queensland. We even have some members in Western Australia. So even if I can't help you personally, we have a fantastic company filled with people who, round squared, we're the peg that doesn't fit, and we really work at, meeting people where they are.
Yeah, I love your business name. I just love it. I love it. It's perfect. It's so nice. It's just whatever, anything is possible. Also, nobody fits, everybody fits at the same time. So let's just figure out what everybody needs individually and go from there. It's really great. It's a great philosophy. So I will put your details in, Lauran. Is the email the best for you?
Yeah, email is definitely the best.
Yeah, so I'll pop that in the group here. And any questions from this chat, pop it in the feed here. Otherwise, if it's that you really want to engage Lauran in your plan and decisions and support, then you're welcome to reach out to her personally through the email that I'll pop in. But thank you for shedding some light for us, Lauran. I really appreciate it. And those of you watching, thanks for tuning in, and we will connect with you soon. But thank you, Lauran.
Amazing. Thanks so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
See you later, everyone.
Bye.